So then moving to item 22, so this is in the first supplementary agenda, the draft council submissions of the inquiries of the 2016 local authority elections. Joe, welcome to the table. Thank you for joining us. Were there any preliminary comments that you wanted to make on this matter?
Just a couple of quick comments. As councillors will recall, I had a briefing with you in the end of July and then circulated some information. At the briefing we talked about a number of different points and there was some mixed views, so those points aren't included in the submission. So, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So are there any questions? Aaron and then Yanni.
Yeah, just no surprises here, Joe. So on number 11, under District Health Board elections, the council supports investigation the benefits of... Oh,
there's a missing word there.
Yeah, is it
into the benefits.
Oh, into the benefits. So it says being held together. They're already held together.
Yes, are there benefits in them being held together?
Right.
I'm happy to change that to reflect held separately.
Yeah, oh no, held together makes more sense. But my question around that was, I thought there was an agreement at that working party that the difference in the two systems at the moment, the STV first past the post, is causing a lot of confusion and trouble for voters.
We've made that sentence within the paragraph further acknowledges the possibility for confusion. It's the District Health Board's, or the Ministry of Health, I believe's, decision for STV voting. The councils make their own decisions. So I haven't included that in there because that's a decision of the Ministry of Health, not something to do with the regulations.
So if the Ministry aren't going to change their minds, and I would not comment and leading into an election whether we have an open-minded minister or not, but if they're not likely to change their minds, would we look at changing ours?
Potentially.
Okay, so we can look at that beyond now, leading up to the election. Okay,
yes.
There was that one. Whoops. If someone else, my thing dropped off because I didn't touch my screen.
Shall we come back to you when you're ready? So I've got Yanni, Sarah, Vicky, and then we'll come back to you, Aaron.
Just two things that I think we discussed that we didn't have agreement on were the online voting, which I see in here that we're recommending it be used, but when the report came to council last term, the council voted against that. And the second one was around the not refunding the candidate deposits. So they're still in here, and I was just going to raise with it. I mean, personally, I feel uncomfortable not refunding campaign deposits, and also just thought if the online voting is contentious, then we should probably remove it as well.
The recommendation there is that the legislation be amended to allow for online voting. So it was more about having that ability than the council will use it. And with regard to not refunding the deposits, that's fine. If there's, I mean, that point can be taken out.
All right, so we'll have some discussion on that once we've come to the end of questions. I'll just note that for discussion. Okay, so Yanni, that's you done? Yep, great. Sarah.
Yeah, sorry, because I was away while when the first stuff happened with councillors, and it wasn't clear from the email sort of where it was all heading. I'd like to agree with both Aaron and Yanni, and about both the deposit. The refund should be given, especially if we're looking at people who may not be able to afford necessarily to stump up to start with. I also think that actually people do need to pay a deposit, and I think that someone who's serious about standing should be able to get enough support to get $200 together. And I don't think it's very much, and I don't think it would actually get in the way of people standing, and I do think that people should get that back at the end. So if we could, I don't know, I guess it's going to take a bit more discussion. But the other one was
some debate on that in a minute.
Was on STV. So both Wellington and Dunedin use STV, and it'll be really good to know if they had less confusion over their voting systems when they were consistent with the Ministry of Health. And I'm really sorry I didn't send that beforehand. Really, really sorry that I didn't send that question through beforehand. I just thought of it last night. But I think it would be really good for us to look at changing our system to keep it consistent with the Ministry of Health and the CDHB elections. Now, we don't have any say on the other one, but I think keeping it consistent is really important, and I think that it's more democratic as well to change to STV.
I can't comment about whether or not other councils had less confusion or not. This is a submission with the points. If there are points in there that the council isn't in agreement of, they can just come out. There's no requirement on us to submit to the committee. However, obviously I'm recommending that we do. So if that's a point, we can make those changes to, or remove the entire section with regard to the deposit if the council is in agreement of it staying as it is, and with regard to the STV, the council will have the opportunity to consider that itself. So I think acknowledging the point that there's confusion is probably, or there has been confusion, is probably relevant, but it doesn't tie the council into anything or any decision with regard to that.
All right, so I've noted three things already, things that we need to give some direction on: the online voting, refund of the deposit, and confusion over STV. We'll finish questions and then I'll just get a steer as to where people are at on that, maybe to avoid needing to have a full debate about those things, but let's just see where we go. So Sarah, that was your questions? Yep, great. Okay, so still in questions, Vicky and then Aaron. And then
so
Glenn.
we didn't include anything, Joe, on the fact that people can still, at the moment, vote in more than one part of the city.
The ratepayer enrolment entitlement, yes, there seemed to be not agreement around the table when we had that briefing, so I've taken that point out completely.
Okay, I'd like us to debate putting that back in.
Okay. So Vicky, Aaron and then Glenn.
Well, funnily enough, mine got asked and semi-answered by Yanni and Sarah, so it seems we're all on the same thing. I thought, just on Yanni's one, on the electronic voting, I thought we were, at that meeting, were very clear that we were keen as on bringing in the electronic, but just the way Yanni said it sounded not, but you've clarified that we are keen.
Oh, keen on the legislation allowing for that to happen, yes.
Yep, brilliant.
And finally Glenn.
Thank you, Joe. Just wishing to clarify under 7 over online voting where it says should be offered on a trial basis. It's actually the real thing, as we know, so rather than a trial, which is something we discussed last time. Did we come to a consensus on that?
I think one of the reasons that the trial basis was whether or not, if it's made that online voting must be used in 2019, that's a short period of time to have that sorted for all the councils. Yeah. So perhaps I could, assuming that point stays in, perhaps clarify, rather than say trial basis, on at least a trial basis, or something, wording to that effect, to indicate that the council would be supportive of it being available full stop.
Sure, yeah.
There's been quite a lot of discussion around Sulgum and LGNZ about perhaps online voting being available to subsets, like particular demographic areas, or perhaps in a by-election type environment, just to, I guess, fine-tune the system.
Yeah. I'm open to the idea of it. I just sense it could be problematic given what is the definition of a trial, because an election is an election. Right. You know, how do you actually have a trial?
So I think, that's covered really by the addition of the words "at least." And obviously, if we were going to adopt online voting for any election, that would be, and you'll put me right, Joe, if I'm wrong, that would be an explicit decision of council to do that. All we're doing here is saying the opportunity should be available. We're just submitting that the opportunity should be available. Whether we choose to do that and what the details of that would be, obviously, is something that we'd consider separately than this. This is just about advocating the opportunity be available to those councils that subsequently choose to. Phil.
Andrew, I just wondered if I could ask Joe, but did the work around the, like this reference to the postal voting, and I think that makes sense given the circumstances of delivery times at the moment, but I'm just wondering, did the working group consider, adding to the opportunity for people to vote by way of having some polling booths?
Not as such, no, we didn't. There is the ability for, if people haven't received their voting papers in the mail, to cast a special vote, in which case we had 4 sites around the city where people could do that. So no, we haven't suggested polling as such, but it's facilities we can make available in some way, because even if people perhaps receive their voting documents but for whatever reason haven't got them, particularly as we're getting close to the end of it, then they can come into locations, and like I said, there were 4 in 2016. I think we'd look at increasing that in 2019.
So we could do that as a council, Joe?
Well, we could increase the number of sites so that if people did need to cast a special vote or wanted to bring their papers in because they didn't understand it, then they could do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the end of questions. On the online voting issue, given the comments that have been made around our submission, essentially advocating the opportunity to be available, are people generally comfortable leaving that in the way that it is at the moment? Tim.
Thank you. Just to remind those that were here last time when we discussed it, one of the things about the online voting when it was brought to us was technically if Christchurch didn't pick it up, it would not be used in New Zealand because they needed that mess to make it work. And at the time, many of us felt that we didn't want the people of Christchurch to be guinea pigs on something that was new, because our people had been through enough, so they needed something solid. Do remember, and I'm pretty sure, that the system did get hacked in Australia, so I wanted to see it used somewhere else, let them be the guinea pigs, so when it came back to Christchurch, it was a lot more robust and almost guaranteed, although you can never have a true guarantee of it for the people of Christchurch, because, as Glenn said, it is an election. It is really important to get it right and accurate, and we're very lucky to have people like Joe and others that really work hard on this. So when it does come, and when it is an opportunity, and it will happen sooner or later, my key concern is that it is robust and accurate for the people of Christchurch, full stop. So that's just a bit of a reminder at the time. And I think some of us have forgotten why we voted as we did last time.
Yeah, and that is a good reminder. I'm keen not to get into the substantive issue at the moment because, of course, all we're talking about is what goes into a submission. But I'm getting a sense that there isn't pushback against leaving this in the submission in the way that it is. So on that basis, I'd suggest we leave that in. The refund of the deposit, now there have been different views have been expressed through questions so far. I mean, we can either do this by somebody moving an amendment that we take out the matter relating to the refund of the deposit, but is there a general sense that we're comfortable to take that out, or are there people that believe, I mean, it would be good if we could just come to an agreement so that Joe can take some direction rather than having to have a full debate about this, if we can.
I support Sarah's point of, so we'll start that as either the yes or the no, that the $200 makes people serious about it. You're not running because you think that there should be no peas and bacon and egg pie or whatever, doing it as a joke with your flatmates. You're taking it seriously, and then if you get over 25% of the winning vote, you get your money back. And if you don't get that because of whatever your crazy policy was, you don't see your money again, and hopefully take it more serious next time and just get slightly stronger policies than peas and pies. As was the case with the mayoral candidate once.
Okay, so are you, Aaron, supporting then that we just take that paragraph out?
I suppose essentially that would be the way to go.
Is there anybody who, I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense, because if we do need to debate this, we will.
I wouldn't support that, and would argue,
all right, well, let's deal with this more formally in that case then. So Yanni's signalling amendments that the paragraph on nomination deposit be removed.
On the refund.
So you still pay the the money, but you get a refund.
You pay the money, but you get a refund if you get 25%.
But the chair
Status
reference
quo.
is we should be paying, or we should be paying less.
So we're voting status quo or take it out.
Yeah.
Basically.
All right, so Yanni, your amendment then is,
To remove the sentence
yeah,
around not issuing a refund.
yeah. So have we captured that? So to amendment
Well, that's Sarah's
to,
point.
yeah, to remove the sentence regarding not providing a refund and to maintain the status quo. Or to support the status quo. Okay, that's fine. So is there a seconder for Yanni's amendment, Dave? Okay. We should have got a mover and seconder for the whole thing actually as well, shouldn't we?
So under 12 nominate deposits, the first paragraph is saying, is recommending that the $200 is actually removed. So I think that the $200 should remain and that should be refunded. No, Rob, so we're removing the first paragraph of 12.
No, Yanni only wants to remove
So there are two parts to it, Dave.
If we pass Yanni's amendment, then we have another amendment to get rid of that.
Yep, let's just double check. So
I'll
don't vote for
push an
something.
amendment to get rid of the other part of the paragraph.
The first part.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah.
I suspect we may be going to the realm of making something reasonably straightforward more complicated than
I'm
that.
concerned about that.
But just for some clarity around this and where I'm at with it, and I said this at the workshop, so I'm just seeing if what part of this is in line with the submission or not. Is I'd be happy for the for a deposit still to be paid because I think you need to have that line in the sand to say that you're serious. But I'd probably I think the gist of what Joe has been saying is that there is a cost to administering this. So I sort of sit at the point where reduce the amount, say $50 or $100, and nobody gets it back. So, and that's sort of like a middle ground of all of that.
Right, okay.
Which maybe no one supports.
So that's debate on Yanni's amendment essentially, but is there general agreement that a deposit should be paid?
Yes.
So can we change the submission to reflect that we believe a deposit should be paid and we're about to form a view on whether it should be refunded or not? Okay, so that means we don't need to worry about whether the deposit should be paid or not. So if we can change the submission to reflect that it should be paid, and then let's debate Yanni's amendment in the context of the submission's going to say that the deposit should be paid. Okay, great. Now, a piece in there that acknowledges that the different voting systems and having STV for the DHB election causes confusion. Everybody's in agreement that go in there. It just that confusion is acknowledged. Yep. So we can set that one aside. And then there's the issue that Vicky's raised around the ratepayer role and the ability for people owning multiple properties to vote for the community board in a different ward where they own a property in that different ward. And your proposal, Vicky, would be that we
Just think that we should have one person, one vote. It just seems a fundamental aspect of democracy. Yeah.
So we add to the submission that there be one person, one vote rather than a ratepayer role. Is there general agreement that that go into the submission?
Yes.
Would anybody argue against Vicky's position? All right, so let's add that and we won't debate that. We'll just take it that there's agreement that that goes in. So the only issue then now is let's get a mover and a seconder for the whole thing, and it probably should be somebody who's intending voting against Yanni's amendment. So
properties, that was huge, it's enormous.
So if everybody's in agreement that we put the $200 in and we get a refund, then there's nothing to debate. Is that generally the view? Jamie, you'd indicated that you felt that...
So my view is that I think the $200, I think that actually could be a barrier for some people. I think you need something, but I think 200 is probably at the high side. So I guess what I'm proposing is that it comes out in the wash sort of thing, is no one gets a refund because but you make it a smaller fee. So say $50 or $100 at the absolute most, and then no one gets a refund. And I think, that sort of could be the best.
Okay, so that's going back to the issue that I thought we'd already dealt with, was that people were comfortable with maintaining the status quo on the payment, the only matter at issue was the refund, but I'm now hearing that there is some issue around the payment itself.
Not payment, but the amount.
The amount. Okay.
There's reference here to a reduction in the amount.
Yeah.
But your concern when you mentioned it was about there is an administration cost.
Exactly.
So, but no, wait. But if you drop it, the administration cost is still the same. It's just a lesser amount of money you've got to try and compensate.
No, there's no administration cost if there's no refund.
Yep.
Why don't you put in both options?
Well, why not keep it at 200? Because I do
then there's an
think...
administration cost to refund there.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I was
but
keen
keep
to
it
allow
on.
some free-flowing discussion on this, but it's probably got a little bit more free-flowing than I perhaps thought it would. And I mean, what I was trying to do was to get to a point where we could agree that we were generally agreed on things, bearing in mind that all we're doing is putting things into a submission.
Yeah.
You know, I'd hoped we could get to a point of general agreement without needing to have a big debate on this. So on the issue of whether there should be a fee payable and the amount, if we were to reflect in our submission that there were to be a fee payable, but there could be consideration of reducing the amount, would that capture a common view around the table? No.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, I think the problem is, where I am with it, is that they're kind of connected, because I wouldn't support reducing the fee then if it's if you're still refunding it. So a $200 fee, I would then, if you charge them a $200 fee, then I think that it makes sense to refund that, because it's a sizable amount of money. But on the flip side, though, yeah, but I think there's a better solution. I think that it's prohibitive. So if you then charge $50 to stand, then I would support then not refunding anything to anyone.
All right, let's deal with Yanni's amendment first, and then we'll come to Jamie, Sarah, if there's any issue remaining after that. So, Jamie, I'll come to you. So we'll kind of treat that as a foreshadowed amendment that we'll work up if we need to.
Did you have a mover and
We need a mover and seconder for the substantive motion. So, Aaron, you're happy to move the substantive motion. Tim's happy to second. So, moved by Aaron, seconded by Tim. And then we've got Yanni's amendment, which we'll deal with first. So, Yanni, did you want to say something about this?
Sure. I actually think that, you know, one of the comments that's been made is that if people are serious about standing for public office, then $200 isn't actually a huge amount of money to find. But to me, it should be refunded. And, you know, we already have an issue with, I think, a number of people standing in multiple wards across the city for different positions. So, you know, I personally don't see that it's been a barrier to people participating. And, you know, I think the risk is if we reduce it to, say, $20, then you get a whole heap more people standing, not taking it seriously. So I personally think it's better to have it at a higher level and offer the refund, and that's why I've moved it.
Okay. Does anybody want to speak against Yanni's amendment?
Just quickly, so why I take a counter view to Yanni with that, in the sense that we don't know what we don't know. So it's all well and good to say that, you know, that $200 isn't a barrier, but, you know, there were 4 councillors sitting around this table that were elected unopposed. So maybe if it was a bit cheaper, there might have been more people. So I think it's very hard to say that it's not a barrier, but we just don't know. And I think more people running is actually just good for democracy. So if we could do something to encourage genuine candidates to stand, why wouldn't we? So I'm not saying that you have nothing there, because you do want serious candidates, but I do think that $200 is prohibitive to probably a number of people.
Just be silent on it.
Okay. Sarah.
Just briefly, I'd just like to point out that actually for those of us who are elected and move into these, you know, especially at council, relatively well-paid jobs, the refund of a deposit doesn't matter. For those who don't get elected, actually the refund matters. Many of them won't have employment, and no matter what the size of the refund is, it will make a difference to their pockets, and I think that they should get a refund.
Yep. Any further debate on refund versus no refund? Tim.
Just with regards to the comment about the 4 elected members that got in unopposed, you know, hopefully there's some kind of part there that our communities actually thought we'd done something for 3 years. But the other part of that is what's changed, and what the feedback was, the larger change was there was one position. That's not, So it's not the amount paid, that the feedback I got, it was actually that the gamble was it was one position rather than two, and that was the hurdle. So I think the amount is reasonable, I think it's more than fair, and you do have to have a true commitment, as Aaron said, you know, like peas in a pie, that's just fixation, it's just not, well, it's serious, we represent our community, so I support the $200 and I support the refund, so.
Okay, Pauline.
A $100, which I think is probably more easily accruable by most people, and no refund, because refunding in itself costs a lot of administration. And I think it's a level of $100 means you're serious, but also that you're prepared to take that risk with your money and you'll have a really good go at it. So I think just to reduce that administration cost of a refund is worth considering.
All right, so we're now in a position where we can take a vote on Amendment 1A, remove the sentence regarding the requirement for the candidate nomination deposit be removed from legislation. So if you are in favour of a refund, you would vote in favour of this, and if you're against a refund, you would vote against it.
Can I just clarify, the requirement for the candidate nomination deposit to be refunded? Be removed from legislation.
Be refunded.
The be refunded is missing from there, because otherwise it's requiring that. I don't want to be voting on something that
Yep, no, that's great.
That took away the deposit.
All right, so this is just 1A for the moment. So I'll put this. All those in favour? Aye. Against? So that's carried. So that then just becomes something that we're going to... So we're going to remove that. Okay, that's great. So that's now part of the resolution. And then the one person, one vote. My understanding is that we'll vote on this to add it in as well. So I'll put 1B. All those in favour? Against? So that's included as well. So now we've got a substantive resolution that includes both of those. Jamie, did you want to move something about the amount?
Well, it's only if I think we've taken up enough time with it, but it's only if there's support around the table. It's just my perfect world view, but I don't know if anyone else thinks that there's merit in it. Then I will. But
Pauline's the only other person that's indicated there might be support for that. Would there be other support for a consideration of a reduction in the amount?
It's already in there. That's the point.
It's there.
So there's the potential to remove that paragraph.
So from what I understand, the submission already says that it advocates for reducing the amount.
Yep.
Except we've already previously voted on Yarni's amendment, which was that the refund stands. So
correct.
It's kind of a nebulous argument from me now because.
Can I just amend then? We take out the words "or removed," because then the committee should be consideration of recommending the nomination deposit being reduced.
Are people comfortable with that? So we take out the or removed.
We take out the or removed.
I think that reflects the discussion that we've had. All right, so strike out or removed, and I think that reflects the discussion that we've had. Yep.
So I'm just thinking that, so now we're supporting the refund, and so if we reduced the deposit, it would cost us technically, so... It would, but the big discussion started over the amount and the refund. The refund's going to, we support, and I personally support the $200.
But all we're saying is, whereabouts is the wording in the submission on this? Number 12. The nomination deposit be reduced or removed. So it's only, yeah, I mean, I'd be comfortable with removing the words or removed, and we're saying consideration be given to reduction. That doesn't mean that we necessarily...
Oh, no, I'm not, I don't support, I wouldn't support that.
Are you going to move an amendment that we take this paragraph out?
All right, so Tim, you're, so let's formalise it then. So Tim, you're moving that we remove the wording, that whole paragraph. Okay. So the whole paragraph about the $200 nomination being a barrier and possibly reducing or removing it. Okay, so Tim's moved, Sarah has seconded. So we can just take a vote on this, can't we? So who would vote in favour of removing that paragraph? All those in favour? Aye. Against?
No.
No. Can we just get a show of hands? No. So those who, the noes show their hands. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's lost. All right, so we keep that paragraph in. So on the basis of all of that discussion and the decisions that we've made there, now let's come to the substantive motion, which has been moved and seconded, and I'll put that motion... Sarah? Yeah, sure.
One of the things that we discussed earlier on, and I know that's not something that we're going to be taking in or out of changing in this, is the STB method of voting. It's really clear on the Electoral Commission's website and in other places that it's actually a fairer, more democratic system for voting. The fact that we currently have two different systems is confusing for a lot of people, and I think that while we don't have any way of changing what the Ministry of Health wants, I think that as a council we should be considering at the appropriate date, which I think is, I don't know, sometime in the next year, whether we change our voting system. And I'd like to sort of I guess foreshadow maybe a move to try and do that for our next election. Thanks.
Thank you. Glenn.
Thank you. As I alluded to before, I'm open to the concept of online voting. My personal view on this is we take it carefully and quietly. One of the notes that came through last time when we discussed this, that the government wasn't happy for the Auckland Council to proceed with it. So I think that's something we need to have our radar tuned into. Online voting, in my view, is not a trial, it is the real thing, and that goes for by-elections as well. So I'm not sure how you trial online voting. I think that word in itself has issues. So, but as I said, if it could serve to stimulate greater voter participation, that's great. I haven't seen any data that would support that at this point, but if some of you have got that, that's good. Anyway, I think on balance it's a good submission.
Thank you. Dave.
Yeah, just with respect to the online voting, I think we all made a decision last time round, and at that stage it was primarily based around a fear or a perception that online voting may be open to being hacked, and I certainly would support online voting, but only on the premise that some fairly robust IT had been devised, that we had absolute security or confidence in the system that it wasn't going to be hacked and manipulated. So that was I believe was the main reason why we weren't that confident in going forward with it last time. So I certainly would like to see some assurance around the system that it is robust and not liable to be tampered with. And secondly, from a personal point of view, I'm happy with the voting system we have at the moment. I think the STV system is a pig of an idea.
Well, that's clearly a discussion for another day, but thank you for your comments. Tim.
Thank you. I'm totally in support of online voting, and I was last time, but the two things that kind of I didn't support and why I didn't support it last time was the company, or any company needs a critical mass, and Christchurch was that critical mass, so Wellington and Auckland. So the reason why that didn't go ahead in New Zealand was because we turned it down, because we were the turning point, if you like, or the waypoint, if you like, or whatever you want to put it. So that's one reason why I didn't support it, because they needed the numbers, which is totally understandable and no question there. But the other reason is that I just felt that personally the robustness for me personally wasn't there, and as Vicky said before, you can't guarantee that something will not be hacked, because there are some very, very clever people there always nibbling, and it's just a progression. But I think we have to be, if we're going to look at in the future at online voting, we must ensure that we get the best and most robust system available, and we owe it to the people, because voting and democracy is absolutely essential. So that's what I'll just say. Thanks.
Aaron.
Yeah, whichever system we move to, I absolutely support Sarah's point that it needs to be the same, just for consistency. It's easier on people that are making the decisions, and online voting is just the way of the future. To kind of even suggest that it's a wee way off would be crazy. In fact, if you go to I did a Google search, you look at Election Buddy, who do elections all over the world, 4.36 million votes cast in 22,297 elections. And it's the same system, it's the same 256-bit encryption used as major bank security. So I don't know, if anyone here has online banking or has their money in a bank, and you don't trust online voting, you should go put all your money under your pillow or mattress. Yeah.
Joe, just checking in with you, you're comfortable with the discussion that we've had and what we've got in these resolutions? That gives you the guidance that you need to complete the submission?
If the council's happy with me making these amendments and getting the submission off, then I will certainly do so. Yeah, great. So you've got the clarity that you need with this. That's great. Thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's now move